The first 100 days. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. And let's talk about Donald Trump's first 100 days of his second term that I call his first reign because it's a regime and not a government. We're going to go through a list of things that Donald Trump has accomplished, and it's a long list. Whether it's good or bad, you decide. So we'll start with the freshest first. Canada has elected Mark Carney, and Mark Carney has made clear that the United States has antagonized Canada. He called it a betrayal of the country, and he looks at it as America. But we know that it is Donald Trump who is destroying our alliances with our allies. Canada is also going to seek broader Western alliances that don't include the United States. Remember that Canada has been a player on the global stage for as long as we have. They sent their military to aid World War II before we did. So Canada has its own good relations with various countries around the world, and it can capitalize on that. Even more so, specifically, the nations that Donald Trump has spurned, like our Western allies. Then there's the case of Abrego Garcia, Andrew Romero, and based on the Alien Enemies Act, and Donald Trump's DOJ is not complying with one of SCOTUS's orders that ordered the lower court to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. And now Andrew Romero is a lead plaintiff in another lawsuit that is demanding that the government return these people for due process. What I have come to learn, and I've learned this from these two SCOTUS orders and the government's response. Remember to the ACLU-AARP emergency order that the Supreme Court issued 7-2, it specifically ordered Donald Trump to stop the deportation of the people who were part of that class who were planning to be illegally removed, who had been detained without any due process, mind you. Illegally seized, without judicial warrants, without any sort of due process, not even with immigration judges. So I believe that only a Supreme Court order as direct as the one in the ACLU-ARP case is going to, nothing short of that type of a SCOTUS order will work to bring these people back. I think the same would apply to the American-born citizen children who can come back at any time, but whether their accompanying parents can is going to go up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has to make that determination. I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do with those cases, but I do know that Supreme Court is going to want to bring them back for due process. That's what it has said in a circuitous way in Abrego Garcia's case. But with the ACLU case, we see that POTUS did turn the buses around as soon as the order was issued. So, in that regard, Donald Trump hasn't violated a direct SCOTUS order. But Donald Trump's administration keeps defying federal court orders. And Donald Trump keeps distancing himself from his lawyers. Mind you, first of all, they're not his lawyers, they're the government's lawyers. And even if they were his lawyers, he's scapegoating them. Because ultimately, he's the one who is going to be making the decisions. What else happened in the last 100 days? Because of Donald Trump's immigration policies of targeting international students, targeting research funding at universities, freezing aid to colleges, we have seen a brain drain of students and faculty across the United States. And we are going to see more and more of that the longer these targeted attacks go out against our educational institutions. And then there's the dismantling of the Department of Education already completely. That is another question altogether, which takes away from poor children fair square meal a day and free public education. It will impact the rural communities the worst. It will impact people who can't afford to go to school. And it's going to be a travesty because over there too, it is a disenfranchisement rather than capitalization on the human potential of Americans. And that is a huge attack on our future. But don't think that Donald Trump's 100 days tirade and 100 days rampage was or is happening without resistance. People keep saying, what are Democrats doing? What are Democrats doing? Well, led by independent Bernie Sanders, they are engaged in a war against the oligarchy. They have to remain engaged and see what we're fighting for taxing the rich, for having a livable wage, for having affordable housing, for having affordable health care, these basic things. And at this time, we should pay attention to rising leaders. You know, there's AOC, who is a rising leader. She has been for a while. There's always Bernie Sanders leading the way. But then in recent days, we've seen Jasmine Crockett come out and talk loud and speak truth to power. And we have seen Representative Garcia also do the same thing. We've seen Representative Kazar do the same thing. We've seen Senator Chris Murphy and Cory Booker and Senator Van Hollen do the same thing, as well as Representative Maxwell Frost. These are all, some of them are new, some of them are not, some of them are all of them are new to the national stage, but they are rising. And we need to keep paying attention to their rise, because among them will be leaders who will lead us into the next chapter of the United States, because Donald Trump is not going to destroy our republic. I think it is far more complicated than Donald Trump ever thought it was going to be. Quick water break. So thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe and share. This is a one-man operation, and I do my best to get the information out to you so you can make of it what you will, so you can search the truth and find answers in these times. I ask for nothing other than your viewership and that you share it so other people may learn. So in the last 100 days, what else has happened? Well, Congress has been neutered by MAGA. Congress has relented its powers, failed at its advice and consent duties, does nothing as Donald Trump stops paying and enforcing the laws that have been legislated and the departments that have been legislated. So it's given up its congressional oversight powers. And that makes MAGA Congress complicit. But Democrats are doing everything they can to make sure that we don't lose Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We are at that point. And we are seeing that this Congress, led by MAGA Republicans, Mike Johnson and John Thune, are compliant with the executive branch rather than serving as a serious check against the misdeeds and overreaches of the executive branch. Could we call that a constitutional crisis? In one way, yeah, we could. Can we call the defiance of the courts and overreaching into Congress's powers as a constitutional crisis? Yes, I think we could. These are all mini constitutional crises. And because of the structure of our government, it is done in a way that you cannot undo the republic just by defying the courts, or just by overreaching Congress, or just by stopping spending power. But these are crises. Donald Trump is not paying out the monies that are to be paid out in the sectors that are to be paid out, that everything from research funding to international aid to state funding for education and health and infectious disease prevention. All of that money against congressional mandates that are written to law. And I believe that unless there is a concerted effort by the Supreme Court, there will not be any needle will not move on defiance of these courts. There's been an attack by Donald Trump on the 14th Amendment, on birthright citizenship, something that is going up to the Supreme Court now, but not on the merits of birthright citizenship, but whether a district judge can issue a nationwide injunction that pertains to birthright citizenship. I don't know if the Supreme Court will even take up the birthright citizenship issue in this case. So we'll have to see. His repeated talk about a third term, which is against the 22nd Amendment, and it lays out in the 22nd Amendment that you can only be elected for 2 terms, and there's some slippery slope that they're trying to build with the 12th Amendment. It's not going to work. So right now, Donald Trump is in defiance of the 1st, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 8th Amendments by illegally removing and illegally detaining migrants and illegally removing American citizens from American soil. I keep saying illegally removing because it's not deportation. Deportation requires due process of law. In that, violation of the 5th Amendment is also the violation of the Equal Protection Clause with the government's various transgender bans, whether that be the military or for educational funding or for any other facet of the government. There is a discrimination on the basis of sex against transgender people throughout the federal government. Donald Trump has taken our country on a detour. He has derailed Biden's agenda and wants to stop the workings of the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, gun rights legislation. He wants to take a hatchet to the CHIPS Act, and he wants to take a hatchet to the Infrastructure Act. He's pausing projects that were funded by these grants by the federal government. He has thrown the world into economic chaos. He's thrown the world into geopolitical chaos, where we no longer have the world order that we had. It's no longer new since World War II. We now have to sort of build up new world orders, and I don't think that it's going to be a bipolar order either. I think it's going to be a tripolar or multilateral order in the world that's going to be held together by globalism in a generalized way, but there won't be a hegemonic power like the United States used to be. Donald Trump has made sure of that. He has withdrawn from WHO. He has withdrawn from the Climate Pact. He's withdrawing from the Ukraine peace talk. He wants to not be responsible for the U.S. aid programs. He's threatening our Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to pay for the tax cut to the ultra-rich. He's doing indiscriminate drilling, rolling back our rights, causing inhumane and illegal immigration. There's also a war on the environment, the drill baby drill motto, by deregulating EPA regulations that threatens our air and water quality and also our food and drug quality. It also talked the environment by doing away with NOAA, doing away with weather pattern, weather forecasting funding, because that really helps our farmers and our fishermen and our people who rely on trade, everybody, on what's happening with the weather in these extreme weather times so that business can run as usual. The impact of Donald Trump's actions are far-flung, and we are going to feel it for decades, if not longer. The executive orders that are not law, he's using them to govern by fiat. They are not constitutional, many of them, and some of them very well may be. But lack of due process and defying the courts, that's not constitutional at all. Executive orders about bans that collide with the Constitution, executive orders about birthright citizenship, those are not constitutional. We are seeing a rise in fascism in a building of an iron fist sort of monarchical imperial power while ignoring the rule of law, building a police state while ignoring the rule of law, having Doge do data breaches while ignoring the rule of law, creating gulags in foreign countries as well as in the United States, internment camps, detaining migrants, immigrants, and American children without due process of law. That's fascism. There's no governance. Not one bill has been passed by this Congress for the betterment of the American people. There's been no attempt to bring the prices down. There's been talk, but no actual help to farmers or rural people who will be hurt by what's coming. The inflation, the lack of resources, the lack of funding for VAs and schools. This is going to hurt rural communities the most. Then we have, the fact that Donald Trump, again, will have to facilitate the return of these migrants that he has illegally removed from the United States and provide them relief. And they have, according to the Supreme Court, habeas corpus claims that must be heard by an Article 3 court. We have seen massive protests in the last 100 days, the hands-off protest in the millions. Then we had another peaceful protest that honored the Constitution. We're going to have more in May, and it's going to continue, and I believe it's going to get more and more and more in numbers, which is, I think, why Donald Trump issued the two most dangerous executive orders that he has issued thus far. And I'll, talk about them briefly, and I've talked about them before in the previous episode, so please check it out. These executive orders, and I will put them in the description box so you can read them, are dangerous. And then we've seen that in health, that he has raised the cost of medicine by taking away Biden-era drug-lowering executive orders. The latest is that Bobby Jr. is ending opioid alternative prevention campaign of Narcan, where opioid overdoses have been leading cause of death for years. 1 of every 6 kits distributed saves a life. And there have been about 282,000 kits that have been distributed, meaning thousands and thousands of people their lives have been saved because of this. But it's not just this that Bobby is doing with our health. The government, Donald Trump's regime, is cutting state funding for preventable infectious diseases. That includes tuberculosis and HIV. And just like we are seeing the outbreak of measles, which AP reports and Stephanie Kennedy posts on Blue Sky, has now reached 884 cases throughout 10 states. That is a health emergency that our health department should be looking at, that CDC should be looking at. But that's not happening. Rather, there's cutting funding of preventative programs. Attack on judges, defying their orders, playing games with them. The Justice Department does this now at Donald's beck and call, and Pam Bondi, along with creating a police state, is defying and refusing to follow the rule of law. They're undermining the rule of law while talking about going after people who are terrorists who burn the Teslas, but not the terrorists who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. So there's this insane revisionism that has happened that Donald Trump is attempting and his DOJ is pushing. In the medical sector, the cuts to the Medicare and Medicaid programs is a huge fear coming up. Canceling the price control of drugs has increased the price of drugs for people who need it most. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you to Mark Cuban, whose Cost Plus program provides low-cost generic medication to the public, for which he should be thanked. Remember, in these 100 days, not one bill has passed to help the American people. Biden, in his first 100 days, passed the Inflation Reduction Act. In the first 2 years, he passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, and gun rights legislation. As much as he was allowed for the people. But that's not what Donald Trump has done. Donald Trump has gone after the news media, after the freedom of the press, bullied them, cut off access, lied to the media, has White House briefings only for propagandists, cutting down wire services, spinning it on pro-Donald media, and sane-washing the actual horror that is being done. But thankfully, independent journalists and major news organizations like the New York Times and sometimes even Washington Post, despite being compromised, AP, Reuters, they keep reporting this. And we're seeing that Donald Trump is violating the Constitution that in a way that it is not within his powers. It is not within his executive powers to unreasonably arrest without a judicial warrant, without providing due process of law. It is unconstitutional for the president to try to circumvent our constitutional rights. We're now dealing with a war on DEI and woke, which is a race war and a gender war and a rise of this manliness thing that has existed in American politics for over 150 years, that has now turned into white manliness and was white manliness and has turned into, I guess, a sort of neo Anglo movement of manliness that has had an impact. And now these manly people are realizing what Donald Trump is doing and they don't like it. A recession is on the horizon. Instead of removing the cap on Social Security taxes, being taxed on people with higher incomes than $250,000, and solving the insolvency problem that Social Security has, they're talking about cutting Social Security. The tariffs are here. A recession is coming. There's a 60% chance, according to JP Morgan, unless they have changed their outlook. Market volatility, what Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, calls strategic uncertainty, which I call, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, or we don't know what the fuck what is going on. So we're seeing this tsunami coming. We know that now the solution is taxing the rich, but it's never going to happen under Donald Trump. We're seeing attacks on universities. We're seeing attack on education, freezing of the grants, as I said before, compelling compliance with executive orders, taking our country back, an attack on science and education, the two great equalizers. Then going after veterans. Did you know that 30% of veterans are federal workers? So the federal workforce that is being laid off, 30% of them are veterans. They're cutting off the suicide hotline and other services at the VA and cutting funding for veteran services, people who we should be providing the best services to because they have committed their lives to serving our country and defending our nation by making the ultimate sacrifice, and many have. And the pain that is being caused by the U.S. aid program being gone. We don't even know about it. Last time we heard a couple of months ago, a boy died of HIV because he was born with it and did not get the necessary medication that was subsidized by U.S. aid and died because of it. If there's one of them, there's more than one of them. And we see the wealth disparity growing as these needy die of starvation because our U.S. aid program, which was a smidgen of our budget, was helping provide them with life-saving drugs and life-saving food. The evilness of it really cannot be fathomed. It takes a while to process it, and that's why I get angry. At the same time, the rich have never been richer. Donald Trump's cronies have never been richer. So where does that put us today? Where does that put us now? What's coming? We know that the recession is coming. We know that inflation is going to happen. There may be a lowering of gas prices because there's going to be a lowering in demand. But we need to now focus on, and I'm saying this very much as a warning, on what Donald Trump and Pam Bondi are doing with the police state. Donald Trump now has his loyalists in. He has his foreign policy, which is a mess. So that's a distraction. Immigration is a mess. So that's a distraction. Education is a mess. That's a distraction. And harm. These are all harmful distractions. The environment is a mess. Healthcare is a mess. Information is compromised with the signal chat nonsense. Defense is compromised because of people like Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz having signal chats about impending attacks on our enemies. Donald Trump has his streams of cash. He doesn't really care now if the world burns. He doesn't care about these policies. We have to come to terms with that. He's playing fast and loose with the world economy. He's ruling by fiat with executive orders that violate the Constitution. But they're not law. He's not enforcing the laws. He's not appropriating the funds. He's not taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. He's ruling by consensus, by throwing out numbers and in tariffs and having the markets go down and then having people buy, doing insider trading, and then say, no, now we're going to pause our tariffs and the markets go up. And he's playing fast and loose. And many are saying that it's got to do with insider trading. I wouldn't say no to that if you look at the circumstances. And then there's force. The executive orders that Donald Trump issued on April 28th, 2025 have to do with protecting American communities from criminal aliens, which is targeting sanctuary cities and going after them by cutting funding, by making it more difficult. And then another one for national law enforcement resources and the first one to indemnify immunized local law enforcement who will participate in these illegal removals by the federal government, calling it America's law enforcement to pursue criminals and protect innocent citizens. Use of law enforcement resources, whether that be the AG and the FBI or our military, and it says use non-lethal. But it says you go after these people, who we are not going to allow. We're going to go after the states and the localities and the governments where they are working to give rights to people who have been here for years and build a pathway to legal citizenship for many who are undocumented, and simply standing in the way of others who are legal residents, green card holders, international students, and even citizens that we now know. So go click on those links that I provided and check out the two executive orders about the sanctuary cities and also about the use of national law enforcement and military resources to go after what they are calling illegal immigrants, essentially expanding the police state, waiting for the time when regular people rise up and protest for what is happening and the destruction that Donald Trump has wrought upon our country. So beware. You've been warned. Go and read these executive orders and act accordingly in terms of spreading the news and saying no, calling your representatives and senators and saying this is a no. You cannot bring military into local governments. Call your local governments, local representatives, state representatives, and senators and tell them, are you kidding me? We are going to have an intrusion into our state power by Donald Trump's executive orders and not provide residents of our state with due process of law? That threatens every single person in the United States. Hey, they've illegally removed, they're calling deported, but illegally removed American citizens already. So that's what Donald Trump has given us in the last 100 days. Does that make us feel like we're better off? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of pain coming. So with that said, not to leave you in an ominous note, please take care of yourselves. Hold each other close. Understand that those in unfortunate circumstances need our help more than our neglect. With that said, thank you so much. Take care. Please like and share and subscribe. I've already gone past 30 minutes, so I'll talk to you soon.